I've said it before. Pedophiles are reviled in prison. Even on the SNY yards, which are theoretically set aside for rapists and child molesters and their ilk, the child molesters are held in a particular contempt by almost everybody. This was important to me because I was serving my time for the murder of a child molester, a child pornographer named Donald Perez. And I was not slow to play the I killed a pedophile card. The thing about playing the I killed a pedophile card on the main line is you're not the only guy doing it. It is a common form of mitigation when people are explaining their crimes. It makes sense, really. You figure whenever you're high and desperate and not thinking clearly, that's whenever you do things that are out of character. And for many, that's whenever they did things that were out of character and terrible, awful things that they went to prison for. It can be hard having something like that be the thing that defines you for the rest of your life, and people look for any explanation for how they could have done a terrible thing. It's real easy to explain at the end of the story about how you went and killed a pedophile because you thought he might be molesting children, that you didn't know about the pound of cocaine in his nightstand until the last minute, and it really wasn't about that, despite what the cops and the DA think. My case was relatively unique as far as these things go, because even amongst pieces of garbage, Donald Perez was a piece of work. Anybody who will travel clear across the state of California with expensive camera equipment, a giant stuffed animal, and an appointment to rape and videotape the rape of a young boy, either for personal pleasure or to sell later for profit, that guy is a special kind of piece of garbage. And I had clear paperwork expressing exactly how repugnant my victim was. Now, I've given this a lot of thought, and I am not a proponent of vigilante justice. But I wasn't slow to take credit for what I was in there for. I wasn't ashamed of it. You'll notice I'm being very careful in my wording. I'm saying I was arrested for the murder of a pedophile rather than I killed a pedophile. This is because my co-defendant, Ty Abreu, who was innocent of the crime that he was convicted of, he's still in prison, and I'm just not going to say anything specific about the events of his case until I get a chance to talk to him and make sure that I'm not going to hurt his chances of getting out in any way. I don't mean to be wishy-washy, and I do intend to eventually give a detailed account of the events that led to my arrest and incarceration, but that won't be until after Ty tells me that the things that I intend to say will not hurt his chances of getting out. That may sound strange coming from a guy who went SNY, but there it is. My case came up a lot. I remember whenever I was in county jail and I met a friend of mine, Rico. He'd been in prison and had come back to fight a gang-related case, and he and I had an opportunity to become acquainted. He expressed to me that I could go anywhere I wanted in CDC and that I'd get along just fine, that people were going to respect what I was in there for. I think he was trying to set my mind at ease because he could tell I was afraid about going to prison. You see, if I'd just went to prison without first speaking to Rico, and if I'd believed I had the opportunity to go SNY, I might have just rolled up, went into protective custody on the very first opportunity I was given. I was terrified to go to prison. As it turned out, I believed I didn't have the option of going SNY. An officer had lied to me about what was available to me because I had killed a pedophile. In retrospect, I think he may have been an evil person. I've mentioned him once or twice before, and I'll talk about him at greater length whenever I have the time to talk about county jail stories a little, but evil's a strong word. I don't even know if I know what it means. For all I know, the guy volunteered at 3 charities on his weekends, but my experiences with him, he was a sadist, and a clever and quiet sadist too. The type of guy who hurts you and you don't even realize that he has damaged your life until long after he's gone. Rico had told me that I didn't need to worry about having any kind of problem whenever I was active, which had set my mind at ease, but I was still terrified because I knew I wasn't going to fit in. I meet somebody occasionally and they'll say to me, "You don't seem like an inmate." And I get it. I don't seem like I did a bunch of time, and even whenever I was starting, I knew I wasn't going to fit in. I remembered high school, middle school. I was the weird guy in the corner with a book who didn't make eye contact. I was a nice guy, but I just wanted to be left alone. I was self-aware enough to know that in prison, I was still going to be the weird guy in the corner with a book who didn't make eye contact, and I had a strong hunch they didn't just leave that guy alone. I was terrified, and I don't understand why anybody wouldn't be in my shoes. My case did come up quite a bit. I remember in county jail on one occasion I woke up to my boy Fester pushing somebody back out of my cell. The guy had stepped in trying to ask me questions about a newspaper article he had read and was yelling over Fester's shoulder, "Hey, are you the guy from the paper? Hey!" There was an officer, Sakowitz, and I've mentioned him once or twice. He was a decent correctional officer. On the mornings whenever the paper would arrive, he'd always read it first before he handed it into the pod, and I knew I was in it if he called me over specifically and handed it to me instead of anybody else. It's not that my case was such a big deal that I was in all the papers. It's that a local paper, the Anderson Valley Advertiser, had taken a special interest in the specifics of my case, and they ran at least 20 articles and clippings on my case. The publisher had a rule where if somebody would buy a year's subscription to his paper, he would donate a year's subscription to any inmate that would write and ask to have the paper sent to him in prison. As a result, the Anderson Valley Advertiser has a pretty extensive prison circulation in spite of it being a pretty rural paper. Over the course of my incarceration, quite a bit in the first year, but periodically for the 15 years after, I would occasionally have somebody recognize me by face or name and know the specifics of my case, or at least some of them. I do need to pause. I'm not selling that I'm some kind of prison famous, that I rolled up on a yard and people knew who I was and wanted to shake my hand. That's absurd. Rather, I'd get to a building and I'd talk to people and tell my story, and odds were good there'd be at least one or maybe two people who remembered having read about me, and it was demonstrable that I was telling the truth. So what's it like doing time for killing a pedophile? Well, basically, it's just doing time. It didn't change what time yard ran. It didn't change whether I was going to get a visit or how much money I had on my books for canteen. It was pretty much just the reason I was doing time. The funny thing, though, is that the pedophiles really were reviled everywhere, even the SNY yards. I've literally heard somebody say, "They may have gotten me on a rape, and I'm a sex offender, but at least I'm not a diaper sniper." It's kind of beautiful, really. All these people from disparate walks of life coming together to hate pedophiles. And I hate them. I have for as long as I can remember, but as I think about it, the hate, it doesn't actually get anything done. So let's take a moment. Let's not focus on hate. Let's focus on fixing the problem. Harsher laws, compassion, understanding, these things are great, but they need to include big, thick, tall, concrete walls between pedophiles and their victims. That's what I'm going to focus on, because it just sounds a lot better than just sitting here hating.